Hello and welcome to today's video, and if you are new here, my name is Millie and today I'm going to be talking all about the McGrath Divine Rose 2, and I'm also going to be digging through my multichrome collection and finding a dupe for the trichrome in this palette. So I'll be doing some comparison swatches and I'm also going to be doing a demo where I use the palette on both eyes, but I'm going to use a multichrome from my collection on one side and the trichrome on the other side to kind of see how they compare once they're on the lid surrounded by the same color shadows, just to really see if they are perfect dupes. And this is actually the second time I'm filming this. The first time I was filming it, I was halfway through the video and our neighbor decided that it was a good time to start blowing leaves, and also the lighting just wasn't great. I've been trying to film in natural lighting because I am suspecting that the studio lighting has been giving me headaches, so I was trying to test that out, but it's just not the ideal day. It's a little undercast, so I wasn't really able to capture the multichrome shifts, but I will keep the swatches that I did on my arm from that video in natural light, and also I will include some videos with my phone because I think my phone captures it the best and I can kind of move around a bit easier than with the DSLR. So now that I've completely forgot what I said in my intro the first time I filmed this, this is what the palette looks like and it's absolutely stunning. I really hope she keeps doing these different colored packaging for the palettes, and this one's just so beautiful. I was glad that I could snag this version up instead of the regular version. And then this is the inside, just in case you haven't seen it, you can see the shift there in the trichrome. I did pick out the multichrome shades from my indie single collection before the video just to make sure I knew what I was talking about, just so I could see ahead of time to see which ones were the most similar to the trichrome in the McGrath palette. So I was a little bit surprised with some shades that I thought were definite dupes. It actually turns out that they're not, so you will see that in the video. I will do like a bunch that are most similar and then a bunch where I show some shades I thought would be dupes that are kind of similar. They're pretty similar, but there's just something different that doesn't make them complete dupes. Now, the formula of the multichrome in this palette seems very much on par, I think, with most of Pat McGrath's other special shades, including this gold in here. It seems like she has a very particular formulation and also a pressing system because they all look exactly the same. While my indie multichromes, which are obviously hand poured and hand pressed, they are nowhere near this perfect, and even when I touch those they kind of get disturbed, but this one just seems to look exactly the same no matter how many times I've swatched it, which has been a lot. So now let's get into the swatches. So in the middle of my arm I'm going to put the Pat McGrath shade, so we kind of have it as a guide right in the center there. So of course the camera wasn't on, but I'm swatching on this side the shade Ephemera from Baby Bat Beauty, which I thought was very similar. And then on the other side I'm going to swatch Forge by Cleona, which I think is the shade everyone thought would be the most similar. And it definitely is, but it's much more vibrant and it almost seems a little darker. And I think that's because the McGrath shade is kind of aimed to be a bit more wearable and less deep and less kind of threatening, I guess I can say. Then next to Ephemera, I'm gonna put Dawn Eyes Alluring. And this shade looks basically exactly the same as the McGrath shade when I swatched it earlier. The only thing is it is a loose pigment, so I would definitely put it over a tacky base. Next up we have Mirage from Terra Moons, which is also pretty similar, but again it seems like it has a deeper base. Next up is Paralucha from Divina, which is a little similar, but it's definitely less lime green and more like a bronzy green. So these are the shades that are most similar, and I'm also going to swatch some other shades that I thought would be very similar, but they're actually a little bit different. So it looks like in the camera it's very reddish pinkish, but the way I'm looking at it at my angle it looks lime green. So next I'm going to insert some footage with my phone because you can definitely see the shifts much better. Next up, I'm going to be swatching the ones I thought would be similar, but they're actually a little bit different. Most of them are a little too purple. So here's the Pat McGrath shade. Then next to it, from JD Glow. You can see the tones are different. And another one I thought would be really similar is Cleona Weld, but it's definitely not that similar. And from my angle, it's much more of like a forest green than a lime green. Then we have Sydney Gray's Twisted Shifter, which this texture even just feels completely different from all these other multi-chromes. And that one is pretty similar, but the tone of pink is different. Then Head Rush from Terra Moons. This one has a more bronzy, greeny shift. Lucid from Baby Bat Beauty. This one doesn't exactly swatch great, but this one also has a different kind of shift. And then lastly is Magical from Dawn Eyes. Also different. The green shift is not as vibrant. It's more bronzy. So here are some more comparisons. This one's the Pat McGrath, and I will insert some videos with my phone. So those are the swatches, and at first I thought that Ephemera from Baby Bat Beauty would be the most similar, and so that's the one that I used the first time I filmed this. And I will insert some footage here because it actually ended up being pretty different on the lid, which was really shocking. It was much darker. You could tell it had a much deeper base, and I think that's in part because I think that the trichrome in the Pat McGrath palette is made to be a little bit more wearable. Compared to, for example, Cleona you saw in the swatches, it's super vibrant and definitely has that black base. And so I think that can sometimes feel a little intimidating. So the trichrome in the Pat McGrath palette is definitely a bit more subdued. There's definitely a shift, but it's not as metallic as the Cleona, for example. So at the end of the day, it's going to also depend on if you just want a shade that dupes the shade in the Pat McGrath. Do you want it to be exactly the same, or do you want something a little bit more metallic and shiny? So let me get into the demo. I'm going to use the ABH Eye Primer, and I'm going to set it with the ColourPop No Filter Sheer Pressed Powder in the color Bear. And the reason I'm going to set it is because last time I used it with the Makeup Revolution Cut Crease Canvas, and I didn't set it, and I felt like the mattes weren't really compatible with that. They seem to really stick down and not want to blend out, which I've definitely had issues with that with some other super pigmented eyeshadow palettes and matte formulas. So I'm gonna set it just a little bit just to be safe. So I'm first going in with the shade Naked Blush in the crease. This really beautiful tone of like a peach. And I'm going to take a clean blending brush that's a little bit more fluffier and just blend out those edges. Next I'm going to go in with Extreme Burgundy, and I'm just going to put it on the outer crease, kind of like a third way in. And then I'm going to blend out the edge of that with a really small blending brush. So next I'm going to go in with the multichrome, and I'm actually not going to use a tacky base or anything because even though that's what I would always use, I don't think most people are going to be doing that with the Pat McGrath palettes. As far as I know, she doesn't have any special directions for that. I think a lot of people just apply it with their finger. So I'm going to be applying both the multichromes with a finger, and that way it also kind of feels a little bit more kind of blended into the whole look, kind of like melted in. And I just realized I forgot to zoom you guys in, so we'll definitely be zoomed in for this part. So I'm going to pick up Sextraterrestrial. That's like super hard for me to pronounce. And I'm just gonna kind of swipe it on my lid. You can definitely see it's a subtle kind of shade, and I think a tacky base would definitely amp it up a little, but like I mentioned a little bit ago, I don't think that's the purpose of this shade in this palette. I think it's supposed to be a wearable trichrome. So this time on the left eye, I'm gonna go in with Forge instead of Ephemera. Like I said, that one really shocked me because it was so much darker once I applied it. So I'm just swiping that on as well. And it definitely looks much brighter, much more metallic. Very similar, but I think the pink is a different pink when I'm looking at it this way. And again, it just looks darker on the eyes than a Pat McGrath one. So here it is in comparison. I hope you can see that Forge looks darker and just a bit different than this Extraterrestrial. So I'm gonna throw on some lashes and I'll come back to kind of give you some of my thoughts. So I have some thoughts. I think that I would have to kind of compare some of the other shades that I thought were similar to the trichrome on the lid, because it just seems to look totally different once it's applied on the lid. I am going to do that and do the eye swatches. So I'm gonna just insert some footage here and I'm gonna do like a voiceover, but just so that we have that reference to see what they look like on the lid, because it's just kind of really surprised me that the swatches looked so similar and then once I apply them on the lid they're pretty different. So on my right eye I'm going to keep the Pat McGrath shade and I'm going to be switching out my left eye, which will be my right eye in the footage. And so first I'm going to compare Mirage from Terra Moons, and you can already tell it has a much deeper base, and also the tone of pink is completely different, and you can also see a bronzy shift on the outer corner. And the Pat McGrath shade is just so much softer. Then I'm going in with Paraluce from Davina, and this shade is just completely different. I would say it's much more yellow gold. Then I'm going in with Dawn Eyes Alluring, and this one is the one I think is the most similar. Again, looks just a little bit deeper, but I think the pink is pretty close to what it is on the Pat McGrath side, just maybe a little bit darker. And unless I decided to compare Terra Moon's Head Rush as well, and it's pretty similar, but it's more magenta than like a baby pink. So I hope that that's helpful. So far, I'm not honestly impressed with the two mattes in here. I think I need to play with them a little bit more, but I don't remember having to blend as much as I did today when I did have the first three Pat McGrath palettes. I think it was like Subversive, Subliminal, and like something else, I can't remember. I used to have those, but the color stories were just not for me. I just didn't reach for them. I ended up decluttering them. But this color scheme is something I would definitely reach for. I just wasn't really into the others, and also they all had black mattes and golds in them, and it was just too much. So I'd much prefer a plum and a peach and a bunch of beautiful shimmers. And be lookout on a multiple looks using this palette video that will definitely be coming up. And so I'm definitely looking forward to playing with this palette a bit more in that video and just feeling out the mattes a little bit better. But let me know in the comments below if you have this palette, if you got it, and how you're liking it. What do you think of the trichrome, and what do you think of the other shades? I obviously only used 3 shades in the palette, but I have swatched the others and they look so beautiful, so I can't wait to kind of save that for the 4 looks. And so if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will put up some videos up on the screen for you in case you're interested in watching some of my other videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.